We continue now at the top of Daf Kufya Dalit Amud Aleph from Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 114a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that sometimes it's problematic to testify in front of the non-Jewish courts because they rely on minimal evidence in order to take money. As the Gemara now says, Apuma Dechad, they'll rely on the testimony of one witness, and therefore it's problematic if you weren't summoned by that court to go ahead and testify against a fellow Jew in that court. It's a problem, as Rashi says, Apuma Dechad v'nimsa she'efsido shelo kedin. It could come out that this Jew who's testifying is going to make the other Jew lose out, and it's not really just, because again the Jewish court would require two witnesses. And the Gemara therefore notes, V'lo amrna lechad, so therefore we only say this, that the person is excommunicated if he's one witness. Avol betrei, but let's say it's two Jewish witnesses and they go and they testify in the non-Jewish court, so then it wouldn't be a problem, because even in the Jewish court, the person would have been obligated to pay in the same situation. And the Gemara continues, V'chad nami lo amrna lebedine de megista, also even with one witness, it's only a problem in the courts that are in the villages. Rashi says, the megista b'nei kfar, these are the villagers, she'en yodin lodin b'mishpat, they don't know how to do proper justice. Avol beidavar, but in the official non-Jewish courts, inu nami chada mumasa shadule, so they do the same as we do. If you have one witness, they make the person take an oath. They don't actually take money, and therefore one Jewish witness would not be excommunicated if he testifies in those courts. Rashi says, beidavar shilton, again in the official ruling government, chada mumsa shadule al pi echad ein motziin mamon, meaning these courts, they won't take away money based on the testimony of one witness. Avol mechayvin baldin shvul lahachishoed kedin Torah, they say that the person, the litigant, has to take an oath in order to contradict what the aid is saying. That's exactly the halach of the Torah. And Rashi continues with another explanation, Lashon Acher, another explanation. It doesn't mean Megista, which we understood as the courts of the villagers. Rather, it's the Megusta. The word should be Megusta in the Gemara. It means Anasim Bechazaka. It means those who coerce and they use violence, they use force. In those courts, you are not supposed to testify. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Ashi says, Ki avina bei Rav Huna, when I was by the yeshiva of Rav Huna, Mesoras Hashas says, Tzarech Lomar Rav Kahana, it shouldn't be Rav Huna, it should be Rav Kahana, V'cheinu Girsas HaRosh, that's actually the text of the Rosh. In any case, Siboilan, we had the following question. Adam Choshev the Samchi Lekavei Trei, when you have an important person that the non-Jewish courts would rely on as though he were two witnesses, Ma'afki Mamon Apumi, so they're actually going to take money away from the other person based on his testimony, V'loi Boilei Le'asudeh, so maybe for that reason, he shouldn't testify in their courts, he's only one witness, really money should not be taken based on just his testimony. Odilmor maybe, Kevan Adam Choshev, since he's an important person, Lo Matzi Mishtamitlu, he can't really escape from them, Umatzi La'asudeh, and therefore it would be okay for him to testify, and the Gemara says, take with the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Ashi says, Hai Bar Yisrael dezavin le'ara lovet kochavim, a mitzvah de Bar Yisrael chavri. If a Jewish person sells his land to a non-Jewish person, and his neighbor is a Jewish person, so now he's essentially sold his land to a non-Jew, and now his Jewish neighbor has a non-Jewish neighbor. So then mishamtina le, for that we excommunicate him. And the Gemara says, my time, and what's the reason we excommunicate him? Inema mishamdina de bar mitzvah, if you're going to say it's because of the law of bar mitzvah, the law of the bar mitzvah is that a person, the neighbor has the first rights to buy a property. So here he's going ahead and selling to the non-Jew. He should have offered it to the neighbor first. But the Gemara says, V'amar mar, but the master said, Zavin me'akum v'zavin le'akum, if he buys from a non-Jew, sells to a non-Jew, lekam mishamdina de bar mitzvah, there is no halacha bar mitzvah over there. There is no violation there that he had to offer it to the neighbor first in a situation of a non-Jew. So that can't be the problem. So Ella, rather, the Gemara says, Damrinan le, we say to him, Arbis li arya, ar mitzroi, that you've placed a lion on my border by giving me a non-Jewish neighbor, you're putting me in a dangerous situation. And so in such a situation, mishamtinan le, we do excommunicate him, until he accepts upon himself to pay for any kinds of accidents that come because of this non-Jewish neighbor, any kind of damage that comes by the non-Jewish neighbor. If he takes that responsibility upon himself, then we take him out of excommunication. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Natalu muchsin es chamoro, if the customs collectors take his donkey, v'nasun lo chamor acher, they give him another donkey, or natnu listim es ksusa, let's say the bandits take his garment, v'nasnu lo ksus acheres, they give him a different garment, harei elu shelo, he's allowed to keep it, mimnei shabayla misyayishin mehen, because the original owners, they gave up hope from ever getting those items back. And the Mishnah continues, Hamatzil min hanar, if somebody saves something from a river, or min hagayis, or from a troop of soldiers, or min halistim, or from bandits, if the original owners gave up hope, again, harei lo shelo, he's allowed to keep the items. V'chein nechil shel devorim, similarly, let's say there's a swarm of bees, if the original owners gave up hope, harei lo shelo, he's allowed to keep those as well. And the Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says, Ne'emenes isha o katan lomer, a woman or a minor is believed to say, Mikan yotza nachil zeh, that this swarm of bees came from this particular property, it belonged to this person. U'mahalich besoch sadeh chavero lahatzel es nechilo, a person is also allowed to go into the field of his friend to save his swarm of bees. V'im hizik, and if he damages anything when he goes into that field, meshali mash hizik, he has to pay whatever he damaged. Avalo yakut says sochal manas litin es adamim, but one thing he cannot do is, he can't cut off a branch off the person's tree, let's say in order to get the bees, and he's going to do it on condition that he'll pay back money. He'll give that person the value of the branch. He's not allowed to do that. Rabbi Yishmael ben Oshel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Omer, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, says, Af kotzetz v'nos in es adamim, he is allowed to cut off the branch, and then he could just pay him back the value. He can pay that in money. And Rashi explains, Hareilu Shalo, he can keep it to Mistama Nisyaishu HaBailam, because this is a situation where we say Mistama, there was Yish Bailam, the Bailam gave up hope, Miyad right away, the Kananu Hech B'Yish V'Shina Rishus, therefore this person acquires it with the combination of Yish, that the original owner gave up hope, and Shina Rishus, that it now transferred to a new Rishus, to a new domain. And Rashi continues, in Nisyaishu HaBailam, the second cases of the Mishnah said that if the original owners gave up hope again, he's able to keep it. D'Shaminan D'Yayish. Now that means that we actually heard that he gave up hope. D'Yamar Vailach Yisarn Kiss, he said, woe is to me that I've lost money. Avol Stamalo, but we don't automatically assume in these cases, that's the case of Nahar, Gaius, and Liston, a river, or troop of soldiers or bandits, we don't automatically assume that they gave up hope. And so Rashi points out, Vikasha listim de Seifa, listim de Reisha. Now it's actually difficult. There's a contradiction because we talk about bandits in the first part of the Mishnah. We talk about bandits at the end part of the Mishnah. In one case it's automatic that we assume Yish, and in one case it's not automatic. Uva Gemara Parach, the Gemara will ask this, so Mashani Lan, the Gemara will answer, Chada Balistim Akam, in one case we're talking about bandits that are not Jewish, V'chada Balistim Yisrael, the other case we're talking about bandits that are Jewish, the Miyayish Mistam, in that case we assume that there is Yish. And finally, Rashi says, Lo yakot says, Asoch, a person can't cut down the branch, means to say, Nesiyashvu devorim, al sukas chavero, let's say you have the bees, they settle, they make a place to live, so to speak, on the branch of his friend in another person's property. V'yare litlan achas achas, now he doesn't want to take the bees one by one, shalivrchu, they're going to run away. So what he wants to do is cut down the branch and take the whole thing. So Lo yakot says, Asoch, he's not allowed to cut that branch, laholichon kulam biacha, to take all the bees at once. V'afilu amanas litin dam, even if he's doing it on the condition that he plans on paying the person back and compensating in terms of the value, he's still not allowed to do that according to the Tana Kamma. Again, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, disagrees and says he is allowed to do that as long as he'll pay back the money. And the Gemara says, Tana was taught, Im natal machzer lebailim harishonim, that if the person does take these items from the muchas, from the customs collector, he does have to return it to the original owner. And so the Gemara says, Kasavar, this Tana holds, Yish kadi lokani, that Yish alone is not able to create an acquisition. Umeikara bisura saliyadi, therefore he's taking it beisr, he's taking it in a prohibited manner, and therefore he has to return it. Now the Gemara here seems to be assuming that our case over here, when it's taken by the customs collector then given to somebody else, seems to be a case of only Yish and not Yish and Shina Rishus. Even though Rashi, when Rashi explained the Mishnah, he said the case of the Mishnah is a case of Yish and Shina Rishus. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger notes this question. Rabbi Akiva Eiger says on that Rashi on the Mishnah, Hare Elu Shalo V'Shina Rishus. Again, Rashi said that the person is able to acquire the item given to him by the muhsin because it's a combination of Yish and Shina Rishus. He says, Kashali, it's difficult. Why does the Gemara say that the Tan of the Bryce holds Yish alone is not Koneh, or have a Yish V'Shina Rishus? Isn't it a situation of Yish plus Shina Rishus? It must be. It's not considered Shina Rishus. Tosas La'el, that's something that Tosas writes earlier on. Rabbi Akiva Eiger goes on to discuss this issue, but in any case, it seems from the Gemara at first glance, certainly, that we're talking only about Yish, we're not talking about Shina Rishus. And the Gemara continues, Vika Diamri, there are those that say, Imbola Hachzir, Yachzir Labailam Rishon, if he wants to return it, he returns it to the original owner. My time, and what's the reason? Yish Kadikani, meaning to say, if he wants to, then he returns it to the original, meaning so Yish alone really, he does create an acquisition, he doesn't have to return it to the original owner. Miu, nevertheless, Yamri Yafshi B'Maman She'eno Shali, but if he says, I don't want to keep money that's not really mine, that's what it means to say, according to the second version, Machzir Labailam Rishonim, then he returns it to the original owners. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Harei elu shalom mipnei shabaylam v'chulu. He's allowed to keep it because the original owners, they've despaired, they've given up hope. Amar Rav Ashi says, Lo shanu elalistim ovid kochavim. This idea that the original owners, it's automatically assumed that they give up hope, that's only if the bandits are not Jewish. Avalistim Yisrael, but if the bandits are Jewish, lo, so then the original owner doesn't give up hope. Why? Because savar lemachar nekitin alei bidina, because he thinks to himself, tomorrow I'll take them to court, I'll be able to get back my item. The Gemara says to this, Maskif lo Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asked on this Adrav, on the contrary, Ibcha mistaber, the exact opposite is more logical. Akom the daini begisi, when it comes to the non-Jewish courts, so there they judge a case and they're able to enforce it. They use force in order to coerce whatever their judgment is. So lo miyayish, so there he's not automatically going to give up hope, because he'll go to the non-Jewish courts and they'll be able to enforce their verdict. But Yisrael, when it comes to the Jewish bandits and the Jewish court, kevan da amri memar, since all they do is verbally declare what their verdict is, but they don't have any power to enforce it, so miyayish, so there really is yish automatically, the person does despair, and so therefore, ella, rather, you have to say the opposite. Itmar aseifa itmar, if you're going to say this statement of lo shanu, then you should really go, it goes on the seifa, the statement that we said above, should go on the end of the Mishnah, meaning to say as follows, hamatzil min ha'akum u'min halistim im nisyaishu ha'bailim. There it says that if he saves something from the akum or from the listim, from the bandits, so if the owners give up hope, what does it mean, im nisyaishu ha'bailim in? Meaning to say, if they give up hope, yes, stamalo, but if they don't, if nothing happens, we don't automatically assume they gave up hope, and so on that we should make the same type of comment that we made above, lo shanu ela akum, that idea that they don't give up hope automatically, that's only by akum, that's only if the bandits are not Jewish, mishum dedaini begisi, because again, they're able to enforce their judgments using force, avalistim Yisrael, but if the bandits are Jewish, so you're going to go to a Jewish court, kevan da amri memar, since all they do is verbally issue their verdict, miyayish, so then the person automatically does give up hope. And the Gemara continues, Tanan Hasam, we learned in a mission over there, Meseches Kelim, Oros Shel Balabayis, if you have the hides, and they belong to a Balabayis, meaning to say he's not a professional, he's not selling these to other people, so Machshavim et Hamasan, so just his thought, let's say he thinks to himself, this is the use that I want for these Oros, this is the way they're going to be as their final product, so then they're Metamasan, then that causes that they're Makabel Tumah, because once it's a finished product, it's considered to be a Kli, and it's Makabel Tumah. But let's say it belongs to a leather worker, so even if he decides something, but he might sell it later on, and then it's going to turn into something else, so ein machshava metamasan, so his thought alone is not going to cause that it's considered a finished product, that it's considered a kli, and therefore his machshava is not going to cause that it's makabel tumah. And the Mishnah also says, shal gazlan, let's say it belongs to a gazlan, that's somebody who robs openly, so ein machshava metamasan, so his thought is not going to make it tameh, because the original owner hasn't given up hope, he still thinks he's going to get it back, he knows who stole from him. V'shal gana, but if it's a ganav, that's somebody who steals in secret, so you don't know who stole it, so then it's already his, the other person gave up hope, machshava metamasan, we say that his machshava actually does cause it to be makabel tumah. And the Mishnah continues with another opinion. Rabbi Shimon says, Chiluf hadvarim, it's the exact opposite. Shal gazlan machshava metamasan, by a gazlan, so then his machshava actually does cause it to be makabel tumah, since he robbed so brazenly, the original owner gives up hope. But shal gana, but if it's a gana, if somebody who steals in a secret manner, ein machshava metamasan, his machshava is not going to cause it to be makabel tumah, because lafi shalo nesiyayishu habaylim, because in that case the original owner did not give up hope. And the Gemara says, Amar Ula says, Machlokas bestam. The whole Machlokas over here is if nothing specifically is mentioned. Avol biyadu, but let's say it's known, the person actually expresses the idea that he's given up hope. Divrei hakol yish kani. Everybody agrees yish would create an acquisition in that case. But Rabba says, Biyadu anami machlokas. The same machlokas exists even in a situation where you heard that the person was miyayish. And Rashi says, Biyadu anami machlokas. Even if you heard, there's still a machlokas. The inami deshamina de miyayish. Meaning, even if we heard him say that he gave up hope, Amri Rabbanan begazlan de lo havi yish. He's just saying that. But the Rabbanan would say by a gazlan, it's still not considered yish. The chol shaita daite lemin kedei bedina. Because the person's always thinking, I'm going to take him to court. V'chein ganav Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon would say the same thing by a ganav. Just because they say they give up hope, doesn't mean that they actually give up hope. That's Rabba's opinion. And so the Gemara continues, Abaye said to Rabba, Lo siflo galei de Ula. Don't argue on Ula. Ula was the one that said, again, if you hear clearly that they were miyayish, that's considered yish, and we say there's a kinyan, don't argue on that. The Tanan b'masnis and kavase, because we learned in our Mishnah exactly like that. What does it say in our Mishnah? It says, Lafi shalon esiyayish habaylim, because the owners haven't given up hope. So it sounds exactly like Ula, time of the lo nesiyayishu habaylim. The reason why is because they haven't given up hope. Avol nesiyayishu habaylim, but if you heard that they did give up hope, harei lo shalo, so then he can keep the items. You see that as long as you've heard that he was miyayish, that's enough. The Gemara says, Amar le, no, he said back to him, Anon lefi she'ein yish l'bai l'masnin Allah. We have a different text in the Mishnah. The way that we learned the Mishnah was because there's no possibility of yish for the owners in this case. That's how we learn the Mishnah, so that's consistent with the way that I have understood in situations of yish. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Notlu Muchsin Chamor V'chulu. It said again, if the customs collectors take his donkey. Now the Gemara's assumption over here is that Muchsin are considered Gazlonim, they're stealing in the open. And then the Mishnah goes on to talk about Listim, which are bandits. The assumption is that that's like a Ganav, they're stealing secretly. And so the Gemara therefore asks, Mani, who's the author of our Mishnah? I Rabbanan, if you're going to say it follows the Rabbanan, so Kasha Gazlan, then we have a difficulty by Gazlan, because again, according to the Rabbanan, by a Gazlan we say that there is no Yish, and here we're saying by the Muchsin, there is Yish, seems to be not like the Rabbanan. And Rabbi Shimon, if you're going to say Rabbi Shimon, so Rabbi Shimon is the one that says by a Ganav there's no Yish, so Kasha Ganav, so then Ganav is difficult, meaning the listim over here are considered Ganavim, and we're saying there is Yish. We're saying in our Mishnah that there's Yish in both of the cases. And the Gemara says, B'shlom Ula, now it could work out well according to Ula, to Amar Biyadua Kani, because he says if you've heard that the person was Miyayish, it's a good kinyan, so Hachanami Biyadua V'divrei HaKol, you could answer that our Mishnah is talking about a situation where you know that the person was Miyayish and it could follow everyone. Elul Rabba, but according to Rabba, to Amar Biyadua Nami Machlokas, who says even if you've heard that the person was Miyayish, there's still a Machlokas. Hamani, again, who's the author of our Mishnah, Lo Rabbanan, V'lo Rabbi Shimon, it doesn't seem to follow the Rabbanan, doesn't seem to follow Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara answers, Balistim Mizuyin for Rabbi Shimon here. You could say that our Mishnah is talking about armed robbers, meaning when it says the word listim, it's talking about they're doing it out, they're doing it in the open. They're not doing it secretly, just like Muchsin are doing it out in the open, and therefore it's following Rabbi Shimon. Again, Rabbi Shimon holds that by Gazlonim, we assume that there is going to be Yush, the person is going to give up hope. The Gemara says, Yihachi, if so, Hainu Gazlan, but if that's the case, it's the same as Gazlan. You have two cases of Gazlan. You have a case of Muchsin, which is a case of Gazlan. You have a case of Listim Mizuyin, which is a case of Gazlan. The Gemara says, Einachinami, Trei Gavne Gazlan. There are two types of Gazlan in the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come and hear a proof from the following Braisa, Haganav of Hagazlan v'Anas, if you have a Ganav and a Gazlan and an Anas. In Anas, Rashi says, Tekatani gabe Gazlan have a Chamson. When you have the word Anas by a Gazlan, that's a Chamson, the Yav Zuzi, that's someone who takes it by force, but he does give money. So in all of these situations, Hekdesh and Hekdesh, whatever they make Hekdesh is considered Hekdesh. Point is, it's considered to be theirs. Utrumas and Truma, if they make it Truma, it's Truma. Umasros and Meiser, if they make it Meiser, then it is Meiser. And so the Gemara asks the same question, Money, who's the author of this Braisa? Rabbanan. If you're going to say it's the Rabbanan, Kasha Gazlan, then Gazlan is difficult. They say there's no Yish by a Gazlan. Rabbi Shimon, if you can say it's Rabbi Shimon, Kasha Ganav, so then Ganav is difficult, because Rabbi Shimon says there's no Yish by a Ganav. And the Gemara says, as it did before, B'shlama Ula, I understand according to Ula, to Amar Biyadua Kani, who says that if it's known that the person was Miyayish, then it's a kinyan. Hachanami Biyadua V'divrei HaKoli, you could say in this Bryce, it's known that the original owner was Miyayish, and therefore it follows everybody. Ela l'Rabba, but according to Rabba, to Amar Biyadua Nami Machlokas, who says that even if it's known there's a Machlokas whether there's Yish or not, Hamani, so who's the author of this Bryce? Lo Rabbanan, V'lo Rabbi Shimon, it's not the Rabbanan, and it's not Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara says, Hachanami here also will give the same answer as before, but Listim Mizuyin. When we're talking about, over here, Listim Mizuyin, we're talking about armed robbers, meaning to say in this Braisa, when the Braisa says, Haganov v'Hagazlan v'Anas, it's really all talking about Gazlonim, because the Ganav in this Braisa is Listim Mizuyin. It's talking about an armed robber of Rabbi Shimon. It follows Rabbi Shimon, that by Gazlonim we say that there is Yush. The Gemara says, Yachi, if so, Hainu Gazlan, again, that's the same as a Gazlan, so why are we saying Gazlan twice? The Ganav is listed Mizuyan, which is a Gazlan, which really is a Gazlan, and the Gazlan, of course, is a Gazlan, so it seems to be a repeat of what it already said. And the Gemara says, Trei Gavne Gazlan, again, same answer as before, that the Bryce has two cases of Gazlan. Again, it has a case of listed Mizuyan, and it has a case of a regular Gazlan. V'ibay Seiman, if you want, I could say another answer. Hamas Nisa Rebbe, you could say that this Bryce follows Rebbe. To Tanya, because we learned in a Bryce of Rebbe Amar that Rebbe says Ganav ke Gazlan, that a Ganav is the same as a Gazlan, that there's Yish by both, and therefore this Bryce can follow Rebbe, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Yud Daled Amud Beis.